No, then the reason being is because once again, it's rare that we get someone who has so much knowledge of the movimiento, a scholar, and also a person who's lived here locally. So all those things together, that's why it's an honor to have you here, and that's why I'm trying to soak in as much different kinds of perspectives that I could get from you, and that we could get from you, the listeners también. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening that know you, that have heard of you, so they want to hear, whatever bits of knowledge you could share with us while we have this time on this CISA podcast episode. So I wanted to touch base on your history, maybe even giving some for those that don't know Rudy Acuña. I know most of us know like just his importance in the movimiento, but if you would like to say a few words, I think that would be it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I think I think being run out of Fresno State was probably the best thing that could have happened to me anyway, because I came down here and we were working with people in Fresno, good people. I'm telling you, when the spring of '69, the fall semester, the spring semester rather, we'd hired Eliazar Risco as to be the head of La Raza Studies, and then we met with him and Katia Panas, who was UP director, and a couple of other professors, and Guillermo Martinez, who was working on MA in Spanish, was one of the mucha voting reps to the committee putting the program together. I was the other one. And the meetings were fantastic. They were like going to seminars. And just, all the discussions about the curriculum, how to put together, what we wanted to do with it. It's interesting. It was right at that time that Paulo Freire basically became known in the English-speaking world, because that year, the Harvard Educational Review put out a two-part article on him and his thought, and so it was fascinating to read that, and we were reading things, talking about books, and so that like I say, I always had fun learning, and so that it was a real interesting experience. But then there's something to be said to move into another environment, and when moving down to San Fernando Valley State, Rudy Acuña was a founding chair. But he wanted to develop leadership and try to keep the development of caciques. So he was chair for 1.5 semesters, the semester in which he was writing it, and then for 1 year, not 1.5 years. And then we started a rotating chairmanship. It would be for 1 year. We elected an associate chair who would become chair the next year. But the other thing is, he was getting to the point where he was going to write Occupied America. He had written actually 3 textbooks for grade school and junior high and high school. And what happened, he'd go into the class and spend a lot of the time talking about how bad the books he were assigned, so students would tell him, hey, if these are so bad, why the heck are you making us read them? He says, you should write your own book. So he did, and he wrote it as a textbook, the first, Occupied America, which has gone through 9 editions. And I always say that if you're really into Chicano studies, you need all 9 editions. There's a lot of history books that when they create a new edition, they just tag on, a little closer to the future. But those books are like an encyclopedia of Chicano studies. Wow. You're not going to find any place that has more sources, because he footnotes, and sometimes people say, why do you have 300-400 footnotes in one edition of the book? He says, because I've shown you 300 to 400 cases of oppression, so you can't question, was there oppression? It's there, documented, and it comes from a variety of sources. And he writes and lives with a passion. So he created that department, and then said, okay, I'm stepping away. A lot of people, I was chair 3 times, non-consecutive terms, because it was a one year term. And what happened is, my third year there, not everybody wants to be chair. So I said, well, okay, I'll be associate chair and then become the chair. And just working with him, I mean, there's a couple things I still remember from those days. This is 73, and advice like, look, you get to school, you park in the parking lot, you don't, you're down, you don't, you're feeling bad, you don't want to work or whatever. You've got until you get to the door of the building to talk yourself up. He says, if you don't talk yourself up, by the time you get to the door, go back to your car and try it again.
Yeah,
He says, the second time...
Get your mindset straight.
Second time it doesn't work, you still don't feel like it, go home. He says, because one person can just change the whole setting, change the whole environment.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, since it was a rotating chairship, he would always say, look, he says, you're going to be chair for a year. During that year, everybody needs you. Everybody needs your signature. You're going to be like this. Then the term will end and boom, nobody needs your signature. So then you're in effect nobody. He says, get yourself ready for that. And those two pieces of advice were, and there were all kinds of them. We did a lot of committee work together, doing bad cop, good cop, and I've never worked and never known anybody who had such accurate insight, and he has a feeling for things. And he'll say, look, you got to watch out here. I says, I can't tell you exactly what, but I got a feeling you're going to, and it would work that way. And of course, what people didn't realize when you're talking with academics with him, he likes people who discuss with him. And so people say, oh, it's Rudy, you can't question. Don't question him. He likes it. And if he teases you, that's even better, because he only teases people he likes.
Right.
He won't waste his time with teasing people he doesn't like. And it's just been an incredible experience, and we stay in touch. In fact, right now I was checking my phone because he's always posting, and we have phone conversations, messaging back and forth, and with COVID we couldn't get together, but occasionally. Plus he's 93, has Parkinson's, and he's done an amazing comeback, at least part of the way with that. He's actually in pretty good shape for he fell something like 43 times, hitting his head most of the time, and it was bad. So he went through a real rough period, and he himself says that if it were not for Angela, his daughter, and Lupe, his wife, he would not have made it. So no, it's an experience. Even to this day, we'll be talking, he'll just surprise me. He'll say, you better check that, or what do you mean by that? And we both suffered through Jesuit training. He in high school, and I was 6 years with the Jesuits in Fresno. I was with the Diocesan Seminary of Monterey, Fresno. Monterey is now a separate diocese, but it was Jesuit staffed. And
that was for San Jose.
This is in Fresno.
Oh, in Fresno. Okay.
Fresno, yeah. And, I thought I wanted to be a priest.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. And so.
Well, I mean, so that was for how long?
6 years. Almost 6.5 years.
Was this before you went to Northridge?
Oh yes, this was my high school. I went in when I was 13, came out when I was 21. I did high school in the first 2 years of college.
So you were a university altar boy.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's something very unique. A journey for, I don't know that many Chicanos that did that, but I do have tios. I do have tios that went to it.
What's interesting with our first faculty, Rudy, did high school with the Jesuits and did some at Loyola University. Gerald Resendez was a Christian brother for 13 years. Fermin Herrera was in St. John's Seminary here in Camarillo. So there were, and I was, in the seminary up there. So there were several of us. Well, it made sense. With that kind of education and training, you ended up going to school.
That's what I was going to think.
Yeah.
That was like that was a tactic to get higher education.
Yeah.
Early on too.
And the thing with the Jesuits, I mean, when I talk about the judges, I'm really talking about my favorite 2 or 3 because, in any group you're going to find a range of quality. But the top-notch ones are really something. And
you were like Juan Diego of the universities.
No.
Kinda.
Yeah, well... No soy santo, hombre.
No, not that far. But no, I'm just saying, like, you're saying Mexicano, you know what I mean? Up in that scene, getting to know all this higher knowledge.
And the thing was, you're right at one level because I don't know how many times, especially as dean, you'd be in meetings and people would be talking, and so you'd say something, and this would say PhDs, pendejos with PhDs. One of them would turn you and say, "I'd heard you're classically educated. My God, you really are." There was one dean, the dean of education. When I first became dean, you have your assigned seat. I was dean of humanities, so when I walk in the university, that's where dean of humanities. That's where your predecessor. So I sat there, and across is the dean of education, and we'd get into discussions because the provost at that time, Bob Suzuki, had a style that he'd bring up an issue. He'd kind of lay it out, then he'd start around the room, around the tables, a big table, and go all the way around. There were 8 college deans, but you could see people were, they're yes people. They're there, they're trying to figure out what he wants, whatever. So, but me, the Jesuit training, the parts that I really like the stuck. They said, look, there's what you know and there's what you believe. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily the same thing. Because they run by different rules, right?
Right.
Belief in is a center of will. Knowledge is you got to have evidence. You got to back it up.
Right.
And so that's the way we approach things. And so this dean of education, we'd have a conversation, and I would say something, and she would lean forward and she'd say, "How do you know that?" I mean, with that inflection, how do you know that? And I told her, well, you see, in first grade, there was no kindergarten in the rural schools. In first grade, Miss Cochran taught us how to read, and Mrs. Stouffer in second grade developed it. And it's really a useful skill, right? A useful tool.
Yeah.
And then, a couple of meetings later, how do you know that? So I says, I got to stop this. And a veces me pongo necio. So I said, it's really amazing what a dumb fuck Mexican knows, isn't it? She never asked me that question about how do you know it. I mean, it's just, you learn.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first started Chicano studies, there were widows that always challenge you, say, do you have to be one to teach one? I said, whoa. Do you believe knowledge is infused, knowledge is genetic based, or is it acquired?
Yeah.
So we had non-Chicanos. You're hiring Chicanos, so they're not all Chicanos, but we're hiring people who want to work with Chicanos,
right?
Who want to take students where they are and move them forward. So this and working with Rudy, it's gave me the opportunity to do that, and he hated committee work. I dug it and got into it. The trick to committee work, the first When we first started in Chicano Studies, it was part of the Letters and Science, a big college, 24 or 25 departments. So here I am. I don't have an MA yet. I haven't done the thesis, and I'm not tenured, and I'm an instructor, which is a rank below assistant professor. If you have a PhD, you start as assistant professor. I didn't have a PhD. I started as instructor, the first rank below that. So I go to this meeting. There's 23, 24, primarily gray-haired viejitos. There's a couple of women, but they're all men. They all got PhDs. They've all been chairs of the department. I thought, oh shoot, this is going to be a disaster. Well, we start the meeting, and about an hour into it, I figured out. He says, half these people, because they used to send us stacks before every curricular meeting, inch and a half, 2 inches of paperwork to read through. Half these people haven't read what they sent us. A couple of them used to brag of how they could read it during the meeting. That's bullshit.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, and then of the half who read it, half didn't understand it. So I said, I only got to worry about 5 or 6 of these people. So you learn what the flow is, and Rudy was a big help with that. always willing to talk, and like I said, always willing to. He and I would go round on some issues. His mother's family's from Sonora.
Mm-hmm.
Been there since the 1700s. Father's family's from Jalisco.
Mm-hmm.
So he always talks about the Sonorans who ended up winning the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Calles, Obregón, and so on. And so I tell him, no, it's not. There's no Sonoran genius. Es que están pegados a Estados Unidos.
Right.
And they could get parque.
Yeah.
You get Zapata way in the south, he has trouble getting parque. Has trouble getting weapons. I said it was the circumstances, so we used to go around and around on that one. And part of the Jesuit training was there's a difference between argumentation and argument.
Yeah.
Argumentation is developing the idea, the theme, the talk. Argument, you're trying to destroy your opponent.
Right.
And most people get into arguments, not argumentation.
Right. Discussion, productive discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but working, I really feel that I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have got to do what I did if it had not been working with Rudy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's and sometimes he challenges you, and you go, what? Because he's straight arrow.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure he has a lot of those same things to say about you. And from what I've seen, I mean, from what a lot of the other professors that we spoke of, they speak highly of you always, like another elder, for all the work that you've done.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to see from future generations? Things that you would be like, hey, ponte trucha about this, or you keep evolving on this?
I think from my own experiences, and if I can base, well, what else am I going to base it on? My own experiences and what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
I have never regretted speaking up, but I have regretted keeping quiet.
Oof.
That complicity.
Soak that in, people. Soak that in.
That complicity of silence.
Mm.
Keeping quiet. And even if you're not sure, raise it out of perspective. The other thing is, when we work in these institutions, this is really difficult. Try to be in the institution but not of it, in the sense that you don't socialize to the role. That's what I see wrong. We're hiring people now who have had little movement experience, and that was to have to be told to your face, well, what do you mean you want more Chicanos to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted to go, they'd be here.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be here. They want to be where they are. Just dismissing people to, don't socialize. That's extremely hard. You get people hired now, they haven't gone through, they've had struggles. It's hard. Getting a doctorate is hard. And they put you through stupid processes. I know one person who they submit the dissertation chapter by chapter, gets the whole thing done, the whole thing in, and they said, we reject your thesis. What the whole thing is about. Before you start writing a dissertation, you write a prospectus when you lay out your thesis. They could have rejected it then and saved him 2 years of work.
Yeah.
But and don't get into this idea that they put me through it, so I'm going to put them through it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, administration is not your friend. They're there to protect the institution as the institution.
Mm-hmm.
And the first people who are always going to suffer are the students.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've got tenure, there's not a lot they can do to you. The other thing is, I even heard this from fellow Chicanos in our professional association and in some conferences. They say, well, I'd like to speak out. I'd like to challenge. I'd like to do this, but I don't have tenure, so I have to wait till I get tenure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then they say, well, I'm an associate professor with tenure. I want to become professor. People say full professor. There's no such thing as full professor. It's assistant professor, associate professor, professor. But the caste system we put together, it's associate professor, full professor. There's no such thing. But that's what
lecture.
Yeah. El pelado, right? Anyway, and so it's another 5 years as associate to go to full.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do they tell you? They says, you're a full professor tenured. Speak up. Lead the charge.
Right.
You have an obligation to be up in the point now.
Right.
Not back in the back cheering people on.
You're in the safety seat.
And they say, well, but you really can't make a real impact unless you become an administrator. And besides, that's where the money is. Yeah, the gap between administrators, they when they used to say run the universities like businesses, that's the one thing they took, the gap between worker and management pay. It's horrendous. Presidents make $400,000 or $500,000 a year plus a housing allowance, a car allowance.
Wow.
And then your pension is based upon that. And if you work 35 years or so, you're going to get 100% of your salary.
Jeez.
At its highest 12 months. So
that's good living.
No, it's good living if you can get to the top. Admittedly, an assistant professor coming in is going to get paid, I don't know, $75,000, $80,000 a year, and you can't buy a house with that kind of a salary.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, but remember, you're not of that thing. You're in it, but not of it. And that one is hard because there are faculty that would say, hey, don't publicly and openly criticize the provost because he or she gives us reassigned time, gives us extra funds. I said, we used to have a saying that when we were marching at Fresno State and students, we said, the trouble with these administrators that we're trying to get to do something, they all stand up and say, yo no me vendo. Me doy. I says, no te entregues. Have some principios and get together and work with other people because the plasticity of your human nature will work against you if you try to be the Lone Ranger. And unfortunately, people like to come in and think they got their job por bueno y bonito.
They earned it all by themselves.
I had a friend, Katia Panas, had mentioned her, the UP director, and then she left Fresno, went to UC Santa Cruz, and I came down here. She had a friend that got a young woman out of Texas, sharp young woman, got a free ride out of high school to the East Coast. These, I think it was Harvard or Yale, biology. So she came back to UCLA. She's hired, and her thing was, when you get a dissertation, that's the narrowest you're ever going to be in your life. You're the expert on un cachito de information, right? Her focus was, she was studying the germination of castor beans, but she was only interested in that point when the seed actually germinates. She wasn't interested in anything after that. And she got there, and here she is, young, muchacha out of Texas, Tejana, goes off to the East Coast, cut off from Raza, and that was right at the time when things were happening at UCLA. So, some people told her, hey, you're just hired because, you're affirmative action hire. You're hired because the students marching. And so she was saying, this is outrageous because, I'm this, I'm that, whatever. And so Katia told me, says, can you call her up, tell her you know me? And I said to have lunch with her and talk to her about the reality of how these, UCLA had to be busted open too. There is a level of truth in that. Not that you're just an affirmative action hire, not that you're not good. Right. They wouldn't hire you if you're mediocre. Right. But the students and the community busted these places open.
Know why those opportunities are there. People had to put in work for that.
And when we were marching, students of Fresno State with the BSU marching through the halls, disrupting, opening classroom doors, I guess the statute of limitations is gone, so that there was one time when somehow all the fire alarms on campus got pulled. And then when the all clear was, the fire department had to check all the buildings. And then when it got all clear, then boom, they got hit again. And we were marching through the campus in silence and go to the quad and you just stand there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people noticed we're there, then that's when the plática started.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman, Afro, that they called her a matron. Her job, she was a custodian, but her job was to keep clean and keep the women's restrooms supplied with paper goods during the day, because the male custodians couldn't go in once students came. So they stocked everything, cleaned them up in the morning, and she spent all day just hitting all the women's restrooms on campus. So we're going through, and she came out of the restroom, and we said, join us. She says, no, I can't, because I've got 3 grandchildren I'm supporting. I've got to, at this job I need it.
Yeah.
He says, I want to tell you 2 things. He says, one, you can't even clean your clothes unless you have an agitator. And this society is really dirty, so we need a lot of agitation. He says, the other thing is, you're going to college, hopefully you graduate, go out, get a good job. He says,
but can you repeat the last thing that she said? First, she said 2 things.
She said 2 things.
Yeah.
And she says, one, you cannot even clean your clothes unless you have an agitator. The washing machines had an agitator.
Yes.
And she says, the other thing, you hopefully you're going to graduate from college, go out and get a good job. But always remember, there's nobody that can reach in their pocket or their wallet and pull out a piece of paper that is stamped paid in full. You owe. You got to give back. You got to pay and use what you learned. A concrete example of that, there was back in the days of IRCA, there was a lot of people got into the business of teaching ESL and civic citizenship, right? Because that was required to get regularized. So there was a big operation, a nonprofit that got into some trouble, and we worked with the people.
Yeah.
And they had failed to provide any staff development for their teachers. They just didn't do it, and they were being audited, and they were facing having to pay back money. So what we worked out with them is 10 one-day Saturday workshops taught by 10 different professors, 1 a month, free, because they didn't have the money to pay. So this is going to be our contribution. There were a couple of we selected people. So look, all you got to do is you're going to go in, you're going to be talking to these teachers, you're going to talk about your specialization, your academic specialization. This is, it's not going to take much preparation. So there were a couple of the 10 said, look, they got money, they should pay. And I said, no, this is part of that paying back.
Yeah.
And the point we talked about earlier when Rudy and I were marching, and people say, well, if you're a citizen and the immigrant march here, what the heck are you doing here? You're born here. Why are you here? Well, presenciar y apoyar, and that's the thing. We tend to. We don't call each other doctor, professor, or whatever. We call it by first name, and and you downplay it.
Keeping it humilde.
Well, there are places where you become doctor, professor, dean. It's interesting with dean. My God, the number of people that they say, oh, well, where do you work? Well, Northridge. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm working. I've been there and they says, well, are you on the grounds crew? Because the grounds crews were all Mexicans, the custodians were all black, and then I said, well, no, actually, I'm dean. They go, what? You're a dean? I said, yeah. And this even happened entre nosotros. I was for 5-6 years, I was on the board of El Concilio del Condado de Ventura County here.
Oh, yeah, good people.
Yeah, very good. Marcos was running it then, and there's always good people. Well, we had 6 o'clock, 6:30 meetings. So I live in Simi. It takes about an hour to get here. So I'd leave the house at 5. I wanted to grab a quick breakfast, so McDonald's was open 24 hours a day, so I'd drive through there and pick up a a breakfast sandwich and something to drink. Well, there was one time there was this fellow there hitchhiking, and he looked Latino. Says, "Hey, where are you going? ¿Dónde vas?" Says, "Oh, voy a Moore Park." I says, "Hey, I can take you."
Yeah.
So get in. So we're driving along and we're talking. And he says, "Oh, do you work in Moore Park too?" "No." Says, "I'm going to a meeting in Oxnard." He says, "You work in Oxnard?" "No. After the meeting, I'm going back to Northridge where I work." "You work in Northridge?" "Yeah." He says, "What do you do?" And we're in Spanish. It says, "Decano de la Facultad de Humanidades." Silence. And then after a while he says, "Perdone, señor, pero en mi país, decano de facultad es gran cosa." I says, "También es aquí." And he never said another word until he said, "I get off here in Moore Park."
He was humbled.
He was humbled. I said, "No, we would have visitors, speakers coming in from Mexico, and they would say things like, this is after I got my doctorate. They say, well, have you ever thought about getting a doctorate?" I said, "Oh, I have one." I says, "You have one? Oh, why aren't you being introduced as doctor?" I says, "Oh, if you're tenure track, it's a presumption that you have a doctorate."
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there were in the early days we hired some people that when they never got the doctorates, people would always call them doctor. Yeah, but like I say, there's the caste system, and you have to try to, humble. When we were marching, we had a sense of humor, and you need a sense of humor.
Oh yeah.
We would say when things wouldn't work out, like I say, we andamos de fracaso en fracaso, right? And so things are not working out the way you planned, and what we would say is, one of these days we're going to get organized and we're going to be dangerous. So it's in process. It's something you're doing and trying to learn, and it's developing, and it's as I said, it's not human nature is not static, and we're not static. And there's something going on. You got to watch what's going on. If you start assimilating to the, I had a friend, anthropólogo, good guy. He was when he was a student, he was in SDS, so that was his onda, right? He was with us on a lot of things, and we met in committee. All of us, they were fighting with other departments. All of a sudden, somebody is joining in our side and said, "Where?" And people say, "Who the hell is that?" I says, "I don't know. I'm going to find out after me." So I go and introduce myself and say, "Anthropólogo." So we started hanging out together. And when I started complaining about people's, I would say, "Se están vendiendo." And he says, no, they're socializing to the role. He was said, "Man, Chicanos have a right to gentrify." And I said, "Not on the university faculty. There's so few of us. We can't go that route, or we ought not to go that route." And it's hard. And that's why, again, solo ni a la leña comes in. You can't do it on your own. And that's the thing about working with Rudy. Rudy would always, there would be Saturday meetings or committee meetings. He'd always say, "Let's take some students with us." We never just go faculty. We always go 2-3 students. And there's and he knew people in the community. He was active in the community. And then in later years, talking with faculty, they say, "Hey, there's community functions, there's university functions, departmental functions, and community come to Chicano graduation. Right. They come to Dia de los Muertos. They come for 16 de septiembre, 5 de mayo. It says, "And where's the faculty?" And they say, "Well, I don't live in Northridge." "Well, neither do I, but we work here. We work in the valley." There are certain things that, in my view, if you're part of that faculty, that pertenece a todos, and as many as possible need to be, again, presenciar. Convivir.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Totally. That's the whole thing. And I mean, shout outs to some of the professores from Channel Islands University.
Oh, they remind me how we were. That's why I've been working with them. I said, "Man, this is good."
All of them.
It's not people telling me, "Well, you don't know what I do where I live." I said, "You don't know what I do where I live, and it doesn't count. I'm talking about what we do here."
And that's what it's about, conviviendo, going out there, showing your presence, going to what matters when there's collective things happening in the comunidades.
Just standing with people who are there's people out here in the communities doing wonderful things, and they're abandoned. You got to watch and see, just showing up and being with them, speaking up at the right time.
I think that's important. I mean, and it's just going to be my own opinion, but not even an opinion. It's more of a just something that other people have talked about, and it's that we've also had to fight for too little of leadership roles.
Right.
Of why is you're talking about when there was just one or two raza, and then you're like, well, you need at least 5.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in these spaces. Like that's why I think that a lot of these community leaders, even though they don't have those positions, those titles, those doctorates, they're just as important.
Yeah.
And I really respect when people from higher education recognize.
Learn from them.
Yeah.
You learn from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a check on you. It's sometimes I think academics are too platonic in the sense that they live in Plato's cave. The ideals, right there. I said, but you know what? Reality check. Reality is out there, and you got to look at it and put it against your ideal, your theory. There's a saying of well, good in theory, but bad in practice. No, if it's bad in practice, it was bad in theory.
Yeah, and right now, as I'm listening to myself talk, I just wanted to say that though I mentioned Cal State Channel Islands, I know that there's many different university profesores, colegas, staff, administrators that do support the community. So I want to I just want to acknowledge all those folks and really thank them for that, for being that bridge, because I mean, really, that's what it's about, right? Like, I mean, I had an uncle. Whenever you knew that something, some insult was coming or something, because he'd always say, "No, take it like I mean it." And he'd go, "Paz," and you say, "Tío, what the heck?" And he says, "No, take it like I mean it." What was one of those?
Oh, he would, things like, "No, that one should stay out of the sun more,"
Los tíos.
Or that one shouldn't smile so much when they're taking pictures, right?
Los tíos.
And he would tell you.
Sounds like a George Lopez tío.
Yep. Yeah.
What about music, Chicano music? I was going to say just a random thing that just recently happened is the group War got a star on the Walk of Fame.
Yeah.
But yet, Chicano music has been such a big part of American pop culture. I mean, if anything, next to Mexican food, Chicano music has been a major part.
And part of the movement. When we used to have the marches, there always be a group of musicians at the front. Mm-hmm. Usually with rolas de Aztlán. They were well-known corridos songs that they changed the lyrics.
Right.
They adapt the lyrics. Or, the Mexican thing of making a corrido, something happens in the news, the next day there's 3 corridos out there about this.
Yeah. And I wanna give a shout out to Dr. Professor Cuellar, Jose Cuellar from the Dr. Loco.
Dr. Loco and the
because he's one of those. That's the first one that came to mind.
Yeah.
Along with the one that wrote a lot for Zoot Suit, ¿cómo se llama? He wrote the Zoot Suit songs. He wrote a few different. He wrote a Chicano hippie.
You mean Lalo Guerrero?
Yes.
Lalo.
Yes.
Yeah, no, he was a treasure.
Yeah.
I mean, some of his songs, they're dated. Then we might not want to sing them today, but
but that's part of history.
That's part of it, right? It also shows how we're progressing.
Definitely.
I mean, we made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. Well, you want to finish your thought? Okay. Well, let me just say. Yeah. No, there's a lot of reflections. The other day we had some folks from the LGBT community. Also, we've had folks that talk a lot about what's it called, the role of the feminista, and that they were downplaying.
You're hitting two of the areas where we really were off base with the non-binary. We were reading stuff coming out of Cuba and other socialist places that said, all of that non-binary is caused by capitalism, and when capitalism is destroyed, then it will no longer exist. Mm-hmm. And that was nonsense, just absolute nonsense. The other thing is, with them, I got lucky there because my favorite course, History of Mexico, I inherited it because Rudy wrote it, developed it, and taught it the first time, turned it over to Ricardo Romo, who was teaching with us then. He taught it one semester and says, I can't do this because it's a new prep, and I'm working on my doctorate at UCLA, and so nobody wanted to teach it. We had a couple of the Mexicanists in the early faculty that they were, after 3-4 years, there were 12 of us, and no, they So I said, well, hey, okay, I'll do it. So I took it over, and I walk into class, and the first day, and I inherited the class. It was right before it was ready to start. So I'm going with the books that it's assigned, the syllabus. I took it from what was handed to me. So I walk in, I pass it out, whatever.
Yeah.
And in the class was Joana Macias Leteri. She was a little older. She was in her 30s, going back to school, had a child. And she says, after I go through, first day of class is always introduction and overview. Okay, so I finished. Any questions or comments? Yes, Professor. Says, looking at the books you've assigned and the syllabus you've given us, you would never guess that the majority of Mexicans, this is a history of Mexico, that the majority of Mexicans are female. I said, well, what the heck do you want me to do? And she says, you're the only one in this room who's getting paid to be here. So at the end of class, I dumped my books and lecture notes in the office, and I headed up to the library and started looking. No computers. Computer searches are fantastic. You can find things. So you're going through the card catalog. I spent over 2 hours there, found one book, and it really wasn't about women in Mexico. It's about women in Latin America. Power and Pawn by Ann Pescateo. So I checked out the book, went to the bookstore, said, order this book for my class, and went back to class the next day. Said, this is the book. It's not yet available. It will be available shortly. This is an additional textbook that we're going to use. But, she just said it straight up. She's a student, but she had the maturity and the guts to say, Profe, what the heck is this? A history of the Mexican people, and slightly over half of the Mexican people are female, and what are you going to... And so then you start digging in, and you start, and the thing is, working on the history of Mexico and Chicano studies, there's a lot of good books in Spanish, but you can't assign them because not everybody. When we were at Fresno that first year, we decided we're going to do a history of the Americas bilingually. Had one textbook in English, one in Spanish. We had 2 sections of it, so we're going to team teach it. And Anselmo Arriano, que en paz descanse, from New Mexico, he came out. He was teaching with us. And so we were both doing one section. We said, well, we'll do it. And the way we're going to do it is both of us will be in every class together. Well, very quickly, what developed was, because we had one day the syllabus, it was the material in the English text in English. The next day, the material in the Spanish text in Spanish. Well, the students who were strong, primarily English speakers, only showed up on the days in English, and then the Spanish speakers showed up and says, it was a desmadre, it didn't work, that was a stupid plan. But, that was part of the ideal back in the beginning. We're going to do things that at the end our students would be bilingual. Well, that is a heck of a task. But, you got to try.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, that was, we made mistakes, but the big mistake was there again, that the problems of gender were problems created by capitalism.
Yeah.
So you got to, the first goal is to destroy capitalism and replace it with a fair, equitable economic system, and then these other problems will be solved. That's
Right.
bullshit.
Right. That, and second, I think that everything, like we had discussed when we were with the different group, the movimiento is constantly refining itself.
Yes.
And coming from, and like once again acknowledging with some of my students of like different projects that they have mentioned that they're like, hey, colonialism really wrecked a lot of things, really put us in these spaces.
Continuing this thing about,
not to make up excuses, but
not make excuses, but and to call people on their stupidities. Maybe do it as gentle as you can, but el pendejo es pendejo. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Like we say in the rancho, pa pendejo no se estudia, right?
Right.
Well, at the high point of the AIDS epidemic, the governor of Jalisco said, "We don't have AIDS in Jalisco because the machos of Jalisco are so strong that our body just rejects all that."
Yeah.
Well, at that same time, there was a worker that came up here,
Mm-hmm.
got infected, and went back home to die. Living in his mother's home next to a school. Well, some people found out. They burned him out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
They said, because the stupid governor's out there saying, we don't get it because we're strong machos. This is bullshit. You're human beings. You're susceptible to all of that.
Yeah.
And you also engage in those behaviors too. And there's also other cases, that those were hard times.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't help to say, in fact, it was extremely counterproductive to say, well, capitalism, you take care of that, it solves everything. No, those are idiotic.
And with that, and also, I hear a lot about, we had a gentleman here the other day, he's writing a book called Chicano Outlaw, Vico G. He was part of the movimiento. He said he was a beret for part of the berets or around that scene. They talk a lot about, like we've been mentioned, infiltration, and also manipulation of the movimiento.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was there was some of that presence in the university system?
No, it was there. I remember the meetings we had when we were marching, getting ready to march. There was this thing that was like a little card you could have that it basically said, if you're a police officer, if you're, officer of the law, you must identify yourself now and blah, 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 blah. But, they weren't paying attention to that. So you knew it was possible. You knew it was happening. And sometimes you got real surprises when you found out who was involved.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
And they didn't have to be police people.
No.
There were people that, in the name of patriotism, in the name of justice, in the name of whatever, they denuncian.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I said they'd make a big show of checking the lights on their bugs there. I said, you know what? Yeah, look at it, but don't go crazy though, because they don't need to put devices. They got people
right
among us who will tell them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No. That's the thing is, and when you're in places like that, there some of us get in there because of our education. Some of us because we serve a certain purpose. But
it's just like the technology.
Right.
Don't ever put anything online that you would not stand behind.
Correct. I
mean, you gotta if it's out there, you're gonna have to deal with it.
Right. And that's why you try to put out as many positive vibes, or at least, good intentions in what you're putting out there.
With some kind of coherence and logic to it.
Right. No, and once again, everything that we've been trying to create here, it has been, like I said, a little bit, speaking up when nobody else is, a little bit of that, but trying to do it respectfully. So I hope that all the listeners, viewers, they all take that, like we're trying to educate folks. We don't have everything completely figured out, but we have folks like a professor who's been part of the university for 43 years.
43 years.
That's like, I'm like, that's a long time. It's a lot of dedication. You're a Chicano sacerdote, like a Chicano study sacerdote.
No. I tried that one for 6.5 years and decided, no, that's not my gig.
Yeah, no, we were my parents. We used to be devoted to the faith, and no, just as a little kid, I remember once again, I played Juan Diego one time for a play. So that's why and then I saw the play recently that ¿cómo se llama? Don Valdez.
Luis Valdez, yeah.
Yes,
no, the Fresno Memorial Auditorium held 5,000 people. Al día 12 or close, the Sunday closest to it, all the Guadalupana federations and my grandparents were in solid with that. They go to the cathedral, St. John's Cathedral is down the road from the Fresno Auditorium. Standartes de la Virgen, every chapter had their own standarte, and they'd go to Mass with the bishop in the cathedral, and they'd march from the cathedral, the Mass, they had a Mass in the auditorium, but they also did presentation, and that, and every year the place was standing room only, and when they open the tirma and the roses fall, the crowd is cheering every year. It's just you know what's going to happen. You know how it's going to end, but the impact of that, and it's just
what I like about it is, once again, the role, the empowerment role that Juan Diego plays. Sometimes people try to see him as a very passive character, but
indito.
Yeah.
They even haven't talked pidgin Spanish.
Right.
No, the guy worked in the temple before the Spaniards came. The other thing, Virgencita, it's not my dear little Virgin, it's honorable, most worshipful.
Exactly.
And I've had people say, well, how would you translate in because it's not really Virgin, it's
right.
the young lady.
Right.
And I said, yeah, this is a young lady. This is a young lady that'll kick your ass if you don't behave.
Oh, she's a diosa.
Yes.
That's the thing.
I mean, Juan Diego, there's in one of the apparitions, he says, no, she's over there, so I'm going to go this way. No, she meets him.
Right.
He says, you ain't getting away.
Right.
I tell people, look, que soy creyente, pero no me vayan a preguntar en lo que creo.
No, well, and then once again, that's the other thing with me is when I took a class where they were teaching us how they mixed indigenismo it's completely fused into the basically Latino Católico is completely has a different flavor because La Guadalupana, as much as it's connected to one side, it's also just as much connected to the pre-Columbian side.
You see contrary bands riding to war in the Mexican Revolution, both with the Standarte de la Virgen. I said, what's going on here? And it's just no. The other thing is there were never enough priests. They were foolish at first saying we got to teach them Spanish because they don't have the vocabulary for theology. No, they said there's too many of them, too many languages, so we got to learn their languages. And they taught and then there weren't priests around regularly.
The other one that I always think of is El Grito, and that's another priest who became a revolucionario.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that theme that happens, and then in Latin America,
and then you got Morelos, the second priest.
Okay.
It's just and then there was always a strain, which I probably mislabeled by saying it's the roots of liberation theology. Right from the very beginning in Santo Domingo, before they even get to the mainland, you have the decimation of the population. They brought in, we talk about Spaniards bringing animals. The Árabes took the cattle into Spain. The Spaniards were pig farmers, and they bring pigs to the islands where people live off yuca and root vegetables, and the pigs eat it all, destroy it. That's part of the reason people were starving.
Oh, dang. And you're talking about the islands like
the Santo Domingo, the Haiti, the Caribbean.
Okay.
Yeah. And Montesinos, he's one of 4 or 5 Dominicans that were there. And they're at the cathedral in Santo Domingo, so that, so they said, look, this is immoral, this is wrong, you cannot justify such a thing if you're Christian. So they talked among themselves, and Montesinos was their best preacher. So on the third Sunday of Advent, he got up and he said, what you're doing is unpardonable. You must stop it, and you must go to confession and confess your sins. These are mortal sins. You cannot destroy fellow human beings like this. Well, it's the Sunday Mass in the cathedral, so the royalty, the viceroy, the military officers, the rich people are there, so they get pissed off. They send somebody to talk with. Well, they go to talk with the group of Dominicans. They say, "Look, what you can't do this. You want to stay alive. You apologize because you've insulted us. You're not. What you're saying is not true. It's libel." So the group got together and talked about it, and they said, "No, we can't back down." So Montesinos goes back the fourth Sunday of Advent, and he says, basically, I'm paraphrases, what I said about you last time, I was wrong. And people say, oh, see, he's going to apologize. He says, you're worse than what I said, because we're telling you it's wrong. He says, and that is the nature of sin, to know it is wrong and yet still willfully do it. There is no salvation for you. We cannot even give you absolution if you continue this. So they had to get out of town. They went back to Spain. They went to Burgos, and you have then the leyes of Burgos, because they go to the crown, and they said, this is a disaster. And that's what got you the Sepulveda Las Casas debate about, they're basically debating whether the Indians are human.
Right.
And, and what they won, they're human, by saying, look, Your Majesties, do you tax the burros and the caballos of the field? You don't. You don't tax animals. If these are not human, if these are animals, you can't tax them. I'm simplifying the argument, right?
Yeah.
The argument is saying they have souls, they have human souls, because you're taxing them. They got to pay an annual tax, and if they're animals, no. So I said, son of a gun, they got souls, but they need a papacito to look after them, and that's where the gachupin came in. Yeah. You see, those colonial roots, those are still with us and all that. But you got to see, in those kind of settings, there were some who said, no, this is not right. There's another a bishop like Las Casas in Chiapas. They ran him out.
Yeah.
Because he said no. And in I think it's Nicaragua, in Central America.
Romero.
No. This is colonial days. Colonial days. I don't remember his name, but he basically said no, and they killed him, just like Romero. There have been those prophetic voices. The one that speaks for, that's what a prophet is, somebody who speaks for, who speaks for the people. And they're driven by religious convictions. There are not a lot of them.
Yeah.
Most went along with the program. But they're there. And those are the ones we should talk about. See, there's again, who do you teach in history? Who do you talk about? What do you talk about?
Yeah.
It's so important. It sets the frame of reference.
Completely.
Yeah.
And once again, it's like other people might have those kind of sentiments, and it's like, those thoughts have been, people have been with those thoughts already.
Yeah.
And we got to learn from that.
By the way, when those churches, 1836 to 46, were burning from Maine to Georgia, in New York, they didn't burn in the New York diocese.
And that's why.
Well, what happened is the Archbishop of New York first built a palisade, a wall around Old St. Patrick's, and then he took money from the Juntaron de la Limosna and bought guns and ammunition and armed the men, the Irish men of the parish. And the church didn't burn.
And I just want to remember what you said, that that in our history there's been different groups of immigrants at different times that have been put the blame on, scapegoated, as they say. And it's something that we have to see, that as we see those type of patterns happening now, we gotta know that it's also we always they say going back to the old days or what is it to be an Americano, and it's like we're also seeing that we need to put Chicano movimiento, the civil rights movimiento, as part of that Americano way of refining the American Revolution.
Struggle, the idea that people don't, and when we teach the struggle, we like it taught without class. Take that, like the women's movement. You go back, Seneca Falls, and when the people gathered there, well, who has money and can go spend, a week or so at this resort, and who, well, at the same time, in fact, earlier in the 1820s and 30s, there's a movement of working class women in the mills. Working in the mills. That was part of Alexander Hamilton's plan. He's co-architect of the economic system of the United States. And when people go to see, Hamilton, they get all excited. I said, no, look at what the cabron was doing. Mm-hmm. Because he straight out said, if we're to succeed, we need to copy Great Britain. Mm-hmm. He says, and textiles were the big things. He says, and in the textile mills, he says, you need to get more women working because women are paid half of what men were paid. Mm. And children are paid even less. So the earlier children are working in the mills, the more successful we'll be, and we can challenge England's economic hegemony.
Mm. Well, once again, thank you again for sharing today. I hope that we continue these conversations because, like I said, that's the beauty about podcasting. Yeah. Just like the group platicas I used to have, now we could record them and share them for future generations. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of like the magic that we have going on right here. Right. So I thank you again for coming to CISA Podcast to share with us, with everybody in the public. Everybody, thank you for listening, always listening and supporting. Really appreciate you. I'm going to leave you with some last words, however you want to address it to the people that are listening from wherever, whenever. Let's share some words. Heck, I'll even say it. Let's tap a little bit into the part of you that que iba a ser un padrecito. Mix that with a little bit of your Juan Diego of Chicano studies. No. I'm just saying, like, let's just take that out as an inspiration.
No, it's just we're not in this alone. Como decía mi tío, sola la leña. You just. And the only way to keep the faith and keep life, because we're going to get discouraged. This is a hard life. You got to work at it. My wife says, no, it's not so hard. I says, no, if by work at it, I mean putting time and energy in it and keep willing to go back and go back and go back. As long as there's life within us and the ability to, like I tell people, I do not walk as fast as I used to. I don't move as fast as I used to, but I still move. And when I roll out of bed in the morning and I feel the pain, I said, I'm alive for starting another day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that pain is you feel that because you're still alive.
Right.
No, it's funny you say that because once again, another podcast with otros hermanos, the big theme was siempre volvemos a lo mismo. Mm-hmm. We always return to the same, or better yet, it's always a cycle.
Yes.